15 years. I have long argued that private partnership and investment are crucial to transform Puerto Rico's energy system if properly executed. So I expect to hear more about this agreement and their implications. Moreover, federal support has and will continue to be crucial for PREPA's transformation. As members of Congress, we must conduct oversight on how federal funds to rebuild and modernize the island electric system has been spent to this date. However, we must also ensure funding allocated for in the aftermath of Hurricane Maria is no longer delayed by bureaucratic processes and finally reaches the island. This includes the $1.9 billion in CDBG funds provided under the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2018 to improve the electrical power system that are not yet there after 2 years. I want to hear from witnesses about the status of these and other federal funds, including recent efforts and conversations with HUD, FEMA, the Department of Energy, and other important stakeholders. I will also ask what recommendations will the panel make as how Congress can help facilitate the modernization of Puerto Rico's energy system. Lastly, and I must state that we're moving in the direction of a sustainable energy profile. But right now, we need to be able to provide reliable electricity to enable the recovery of Puerto Rico's economy. But we need to ensure reliable electricity until we get there. There is a long way to go, and we must be able to use all resources available. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, in fiscal year 2019, the sources of electricity in Puerto Rico were petroleum, 40%, LNG, 39%, coal, 18%, and renewables, 2.3%. Industry in Puerto Rico has the potential to contribute to our national supply chain for medical products and devices. We also need to ensure providing our people's residential needs by having a reliable system. And that requires a reliable supply, and we must not deny ourselves to examine alternatives. I look forward for the testimony and questioning of a witness, and with that, I yield back to the chairman.
Thank you very much, and let me now turn to our panel and the witnesses that have come. And like I said earlier, I want to thank you very much for taking the time. It's an important subject, and given everything else that's going on and the difficulties of being able to get together to have these kinds of oversight hearings, I appreciate your presence and the presence of all my colleagues that are joining us today. Let me begin now with each 5 minutes for your oral presentation. Anything that was submitted for the record is your written testimony is all made part of the record. And let me begin with Mr. Jose Ortiz, Executive Director, Puerto Rico Electric Power Authority. Mr. Ortiz, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman Grijalva. PREPA has made a good deal of progress on several fronts, despite the devastation of Hurricanes Irma and Maria, the massive damage by multiple earthquakes, and the near shutdown of the Puerto Rico economy due to the COVID-19. The utility is better positioned and in compliance with the requirements of PROMESA, as evidenced by the recent certification of PREPA's 2020 fiscal plan by the Financial Oversight and Management Board of Puerto Rico. Some highlights of the substantial progress towards achievement of the operational initiatives and projects are included in the certified plan, and those are as following. One, the selection of an independent T&D operator to assume responsibility for operating, maintaining, and improving PREPA's transmission and distribution system. That operator, Luma Energy, is a Puerto Rico company owned by two experienced utility sector companies, ATCO and Quanta Services, working with innovative emergency management for its federal funding expertise. Under a public-private partnership, Luma will work to implement the energy sector transformation required by the bipartisan supported laws. Luma also brings an experienced leadership team and a comprehensive plan for the operation, maintenance, and renewal of PREPA's modern grid system. The completion of the work of converting San Juan Power Station to a dual fuel capacity and commissioning of the liquefied natural gas handling facility allows PREPA to achieve significant reductions in greenhouse gas and particulate emissions, providing important public health benefits. In addition, their increased availability enhances the security and reliability of electrical supply in the metropolitan region. The conversion project should save PREPA and its customers around $280 million during the 5-year term of the contract. Another point is the renegotiation of a power purchase and operating agreement with Ecoelectrica and of a long-term gas supply agreement with Naturgy, approved by the FOMB, the Energy Bureau, and granted by the Federal District Court presiding over PREPA's Promesa Title III proceeding. Combined, both contracts are estimated to reduce PREPA's net cost by approximately $100 million annually through September 2032. Another point is the renegotiation of 23 purchase and operating agreements with 7 operational and 16 new renewable generating project developers, totaling 600 megawatts, achieving 30 to 40% lower contract pricing than under the original contract, and 10% contract pricing discount with the operational projects as well. Substantial progress in the repair of PREPA's Costa Sur generating facility after significant damages from January's earthquake have been achieved. The 820 megawatt generating facility unit 5 should be completed by early August 2020. The more heavily damaged Unit 6 is expected to be operational before year end. Development and submission of a new integrated resource plan, which has undergone extensive technical, evidentiary, and community hearings, and is currently before the Energy Bureau for approval. This will enable PREPA to pursue the rapid uptake of renewable and energy storage systems while preserving options that will permit it to procure natural gas-fired generating resources as well. Still, federal support is needed. PREPA expects to reach an agreement with FEMA on a fixed cost estimate on all permanent repair and reconstruction work very soon. We prepared already a 2-year plan, which starts addressing various individual projects, including distributed energy resources, microgrids, and a robust system to critical assets such as hospitals, shelters, and water services. The target is to make federal funding available to reconstruct a more modern and resilient energy grid. In conclusion, PREPA has made significant progress in rebuilding Puerto Rico electric system and restructuring PREPA itself. We have undertaken these efforts with real financial constraints during the transformation of Puerto Rico's energy sector, a truly complex challenge. The federal government support remains critical to our success, and we continue to look forward for ways to expedite the flow of federal funds. Efforts to achieve the resolution of PREPA's Title III restructuring under Promesa were temporarily suspended earlier this year at FOMB's request, given the uncertainties on COVID-19 has created for PREPA and its customers. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before this honorable committee and to provide this testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Ortiz. And let me now turn to Mr. Fermin Fonates, Executive Director, Puerto Rico Public-Private Partnership Authority. The time is yours, sir.
Thank you. Good Chairman Grijalva, Ranking Member Bishop, and committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss the transformation of the Puerto Rico Electric Power Authority. My name is Fermin Fontanes, and I am the Executive Director of the Public-Private Partnerships Authority. My testimony today will address the transformation of PREPA's transmission and distribution system. As Executive Director, I am leading the efforts related to PREPA's transformation and oversaw the procurement process that resulted in the agreement between Luma Energy and PREPA, pursuant to which Luma will operate, maintain, and modernize Puerto Rico's transmission and distribution system. This agreement marks the culmination of more than 18 months procurement process and represents a historic milestone in the government of Puerto Rico's objective of providing modern, affordable, resilient, and reliable power to the island. LUMA is a Puerto Rico company formed by ATCO and Quanta Services, which will work with innovative emergency management to assist with the administration of federal funding. In recent years, PREPA has faced a number of significant challenges, including a lack of managerial continuity and long-term planning, a dated electrical system that is in poor condition, significant leverage that led to its inability to access credit markets, and a geographic mismatch between supply and demand. PREPA's challenges were aggravated by Hurricanes Irma and Maria. After the hurricanes, the government sought not only to rebuild the electric grid, but to transform it into a reliable, resilient, modern, and eco-friendly system. The most effective way to achieve these goals was to partner with a world-class private operator with the expertise, experience, and know-how to complete the much-needed transformation. The procurement process was designed to address a number of key considerations. The government was keenly focused on implementing a robust, competitive, and transparent procurement process to identify the private partner best positioned to accomplish the transaction's objectives. The process was also carried out in coordination with the Financial Oversight and Management Board for Puerto Rico. During the request for proposal process, the P3 Authority provided proponents with extensive access to information related to PREPA and the T&D system. LUMA's proposal presents concrete and detailed plans and timelines for achieving substantial gains in safety, customer service, reliability, and resiliency. The contract also establishes clear obligations and performance metrics which LUMA must comply with. LUMA projects that it will be able to generate significant cost savings throughout the life of the contract. Between the reduction in O&M cost and the improvements in lost energy, LUMA estimates a saving of $293 million per year in 2027. This results in significant annual and cumulative net savings for Puerto Rico and demonstrates that the contract will pay for itself, an estimate of $323 million in cumulative savings by 2027. Notwithstanding these savings, critics of the transaction have argued that the customer's rates will go up. That premise is incorrect. LUMA is subject to the regulatory oversight of the Puerto Rico Energy Bureau, and the contract specifically provides that all budgets prepared by LUMA must comply with rates orders established by PREP. The contract does not require a rate increase or establishes a minimum rate for LUMA to operate. In addition, I want to make clear that no employee will lose their job as a result of this transaction. Their jobs are protected under existing law. Moreover, for those employees who end up working for LUMA, they will have access to world-class safety training and professional development opportunities, all of which have not been available to date for PREPA employees. PREPA's employees are essential for this transformation. Finally, with LUMA, we are bringing accountability to meet our goals of a renewable energy future. LUMA's commitment to complying with and achieving the renewable energy targets set forth in these plans is evidenced in its proposal. This is a first step towards achieving the government's renewable energy goals. The T&D transformation process that took place against a background of unique and unprecedented challenges. Notwithstanding these significant challenges, the P3 Authority was undeterred and forged ahead with its vision to transform PREPA. In partnership with LUMA, PREPA will finally deliver to the people of Puerto Rico what they deserve: a modern, affordable, resilient, and reliable electric energy system that will serve as a driver of economic recovery and growth. This partnership represents the most efficient and effective way to make this transformation a reality for Puerto Rico and its people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. The next is the chair of the Puerto Rico Energy Bureau, Mr. Edison Aviles. Sir?
Yes. Good afternoon, Chair Grijalva, Ranking Member Designee Gonzalez Colan, and members of the committee. My name is Edison Aviles, and I am the chair of the Energy Bureau, also known as the PREP. On behalf of the PREP, I appreciate the opportunity afforded to present our views regarding the transformation of the Puerto Rico Power Authority, PREPA. PREP is an independent regulatory body consisting of a chair commissioner and 4 associate commissioners. all of whom have equal voting rights. The PREP has a mandate to implement and enforce the energy public policy of the government of Puerto Rico, as well as to adopt the regulation necessary for such implementation. The PREP was created in 2014 by the Puerto Rico Energy Transformation and Relief Act, serving as a key component for the full and transparent implementation of the Act's energy reform goals. The PREP has a mandate to ensure electric service is safe, reliable, and affordable. PREP's commissioners are highly qualified professionals. PREP also engaged recognized experts in the regulatory field to assist its informed and grounded regulatory development, and is an active member of NAIDUC. The United States Department of Energy Office of Electricity has provided and continues to provide significant technical assistance in the areas of electric distribution planning and energy efficiency program development. The New York Department of Public Service is currently providing support to the PREP by sharing its expertise and experience with the oversight of the Long Island Power Authority, LIPA, third-party T&D Operation Services Agreement. The recently adjudicated T&D Maintenance and Operation Agreement provides the PREP with tools for enforcement. The private T&D operator has a financial incentive to improve system performance according to metrics approved by the PREP. On the other hand, penalties will be paid by LUMA, not the rate payers. Significant positive changes intended to rebuild public confidence have taken place since the last time the PREP testified in Congress. I am proud to report that the PREP is already conducting numerous proceedings that account for significant steps in advancing the transformational goals of reliability, sustainability, and cost effectiveness. Some notable proceedings include, number one, first rate case. For the first time, electric service rates were set in Puerto Rico by an independent regulator. Number two, regulation on energy cooperative in Puerto Rico. This regulation contributes to the public policy established by the government of Puerto Rico to promote the development of a decentralized energy model capable of providing renewable energy options to the residents of the island. Number three, energy efficiency program development. The process to adopt an energy efficiency regulatory program started in 2019, and we expect to have the regulation in place before year end. This proceeding seeks to ensure an energy efficiency goal of 30% is reached by 2040. Number four, regulation on electric energy wheeling. As a first step, PREP adopted a regulation establishing the legal framework on electric energy wheeling. The second step, currently ongoing, encompasses the unbundling of PREP assets to then adopt the applicable wheeling charges. PREP expects to complete this process within the next 8 months. The Integrated Resource Plan. The IRP is the cornerstone and roadmap of the energy transformation of the island. The PREP is currently evaluating the conformance of the utility proposed IRP with the goals set out in the Puerto Rico Energy Public Policy Act, and we expect the final resolution to be issued in August 2020. 6, preliminary T&D operation and maintenance agreement. It is important to emphasize that A, the Puerto Rico Energy Regulatory Framework, B, the certificate of compliance issued by the PREP, as well as C, the T&D agreement, acknowledge PREP's regulatory authority to ensure LUMA compliance with the energy public policy, the applicable legal framework, and the agreement itself. In our views, for all energy regulatory purposes, LUMA will be in PREPA's shoes. I look forward to your question and remain committed to build up the working relationship with the committee for the benefit of Puerto Rico.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir. Let me now invite for her comments Ms. Ruth Santiago, member, Queremos Sol Coalition, Ms. Santiago, time is yours.
Good afternoon, Chairman Grijalva, members of the House Committee on Natural Resources, and to the public in general. On behalf of the Queremos Sol Coalition, we appreciate the opportunity to testify on the transformation of PREPA. The coalition is composed of civil society groups, including community, environmental, labor, professional organizations, and academia that have come together to promote the transformation of the Puerto Rico electric system. The coalition promotes the transformation of the Puerto Rico electric system as a public service, both relating to PREPA governance and the technology that empowers citizen participation. Recently, PREPA entered into a contract with Luma Energy via a lengthy operation and management agreement for the transmission and distribution system, customer service, power generation, dispatch and control, planning, acquisitions, and many other functions. The contract's initial transition period requires numerous conditions prior to full takeover by Luma. It signifies anything but a foregone conclusion that the transaction will be consummated. We urge this committee, the federal and Puerto Rican governments, to encourage PREPA to annul the Luma contract and develop a plan focused on on-site solar and battery systems and energy efficiency programs based on the recommendations of numerous experts. The Luma contract, in the midst of multiple crises, including the pandemic, seismic activity, socioeconomic dysfunction, and the threat of an active hurricane season, will not provide the 21st century electric system and service that the residents of Puerto Rico require. PREPA needs to transform its governance structure to integrate residents, employees, and businesses. The high poverty rates in Puerto Rico and the economic crisis require energy conservation, efficiency, demand response programs, and renewable energy technologies, primarily rooftop or on-site solar and battery energy systems to substitute the fossil generation and the centralized transmission and distribution system. Queremos Sol opposes the use of billions of dollars in federal funds to rebuild and so-called harden the T&D system and add more fossil generation, especially methane gas, so-called natural gas infrastructure, that the Luma contract would facilitate. Queremos Sol proposes the federal government work with PREPA to take measures to initiate a transparent process for procurement of solar equipment and battery systems to be installed and maintained by the dozens of PREPA employees who have been trained in renewable energy already. The Luma contract is a 20th century approach that will not prepare Puerto Rico for the climate crisis. It dismantles PREPA while simultaneously providing Luma with multiple opportunities to abandon its responsibilities under the agreement. Luma will prepare the PREPA IRP, may become part owner of the electric system, may request increases in electric rates. The contract requires alignment of the proposed T&D work with the grid modernization plan, which requested $21 billion from FEMA, of which $12.2 billion is for reconstruction of existing T&D systems rather than transformation of the system. And about $4 billion of that, additional $4 billion, is for new fossil plants. The London Economics International report estimates that even with federal funding, the electricity rates would increase to 27.8 to 30 cents per kilowatt hour with the proposed T&D work and the RSA for the PREPA restructuring, the debt of the PREPA restructuring. Luma is granted undue control to manage federal funds. It can participate in the selection of the grant administrator and request changes to federal funding. Luma can abandon the tasks required under the contract after PREPA has been dismantled and when reinforcements of the electric system are most needed. The Luma contract infringes upon the rights of PREPA employees, as it will not be required to hire even the majority of PREPA employees. The contract provides for priority payments to Luma to the detriment of other PREPA obligations. Luma may suspend or terminate electric service to government entities that in turn provide public services. The Luma contract would perpetuate centralized fossil fuel generation and T&D system. An example of this kind of old generation is the New Fortress Energy LNG terminal in San Juan. FERC recently issued an order to show cause against New Fortress because it built and operates the terminal without FERC's authorization. If New Fortress had requested FERC authorization, it would have been required to study the health and safety risks of the LNG terminal to nearby communities, workers, and properties prior to building and operating. The potential illegalities of the New Fortress project are exposed in an in-depth report published by Cambio and AIFA. The cost of electricity from San Juan 5 and 6 units already we've seen burning gas is 10.79 cents per million BTU, the most expensive baseload units in PREPA's system. The Federal Oversight Management Board approved the New Fortress project and the new eco-electrical agreements, which cost approximately $500 million more than competitively bid contracts did. The disastrous experience with the privatization of the energy and other sectors in Puerto Rico include the AES coal-burning power plant, which has contaminated the South Coast aquifer. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Ángel Figueroa Jaramillo, President, Electric Industry and Irrigation Workers Union. His statement will be read by the translator, and the translator will be available for the Q&A, so that and Mr. Jaramillo will be participating in those with the translator. With that, Señor Jaramillo, the floor is yours.
Sí, buenas tardes, mi nombre es Ángel Figueroa Jaramillo y comparezco como presidente de la Unión de Trabajadores de la Industria Eléctrica y Riego y agradezco al comité por la invitación. Me acompaña la licenciada Jessica Méndez Corber y el traductor Juan Segarra, que estará emitiendo para efecto de récord la postura de Lautier.
Good afternoon. My name is Ángel Figueroa Jaramillo. I appear as president of the union of UTIER. I am with attorney Jessica Kohlberg, and I thank the committee for the invitation. My statement will be read by translator Juan Segarra. UTIER represents 3,000 of the 6,000 workers that PREPA will lay off due to the Luma Energy contract. However, UTIER speaks not only for the benefit of its members, but also for the 12,000 PREPA retirees and the people of Puerto Rico as a whole. It is essential that this committee know that we agree that PREPA needs to be transformed. However, handing over all current PREPA functions to a private operator is not a transformation. Luma Energy will do everything PREPA is already doing and charging an additional $125 million in public funds for it. A true transformation requires investment and expert input. UTIER and other organizations have made proposals for a true transformation and have fallen on deaf ears. UTIER sponsors Queremos Sol, which is a comprehensive proposal to transform PREPA. We have also proposed changes such as altering the composition of the governing board and the Energy Bureau to increase transparency and consumer representation and limit the discretion that leads to contracting. 2, the implementation of an independent private sector inspector general, IPSIG, as a control to ensure compliance with existing laws and regulations without the need to appoint a trustee. And 3, most importantly, the reinvestment of funds in PREPA's workforce, which has been severely depleted in recent years and led to so many difficulties after Hurricane Maria. But apparently, what the government wants is to wash its hands of the deficiencies of those who have been appointed to manage PREPA and not transform it. As an example, the current CEO, Jose Ortiz, has done nothing for the real transformation. The contract with Luma does not provide any benefit for the people of Puerto Rico. The payment of the contract has already placed PREPA at a $125 million budgetary deficit, as certified by the Financial Oversight and Management Board in the latest budget. There is no doubt that PREPA does not have the resources to pay that money, which is why the Oversight Board is requesting an administrative expense priority in the Title III for Luma Energy, which in turn will affect the retirement system and other creditors. The only way to pay this deficit will be by increasing the rates, which will affect the people of Puerto Rico and disproportionately harm the population living below the poverty level, especially those with annual incomes between $0 and $14,399. This population will have to dedicate between 36 and 42% of their income to pay their electrical bill. Under the contract, Luma has even been given the deference that the plan of adjustment under Title III of PREPA must be, quote, reasonably acceptable to Luma Energy, end quote. Otherwise, LUMA can terminate the contract. The concession on LUMA to have veto power over the approval of the plan of adjustment will pressure the Oversight Board and the Title III Court to approve a plan that is not necessarily in the best interest of the people of Puerto Rico. The question to ask is, why should LUMA have that kind of power? LUMA will not be accountable to the people of Puerto Rico. It can terminate the contract practically at any time with only 120 days notice and leave Puerto Rico without an electric service operator. In addition, despite being a private entity, it will make public policy decisions and manage at its own discretion the $18 billion in federal funds assigned to Puerto Rico. In fact, LUMA has already started bragging about those federal funds to its investors and affiliates. The federal government should stop this. Speaking about accountability, the locally registered corporation was created in January this year for the sole purpose of signing this contract and was created as a limited liability company to avoid responsibility. Furthermore, the contract has an exemption from express liability for any damage that LUMA may cause to its ratepayers. In summary, LUMA will take over PREPA's operations without investing a dime in PREPA or in Puerto Rico. It will charge a fee of $125 million and manage $18 billion in federal funds, and will be able to award contracts to Quanta Services and ATCO, while PREPA pays for its transition and operations. It is not accountable to the people of Puerto Rico, and it is
to wrap that up pretty soon, sir.
Transform the electrical process. In fact,
Thank you.
LUMA, thank you.
You're welcome. The next person is Mr. Jose Rossi, President, Puerto Rico Institute for Competitiveness and Sustainable Economy. Sir, Mr. Rossi, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman Grijalva, Ranking Member Designee Gonzalez, and members of the committee. Thank you for this opportunity to examine the much-needed transformation of the Puerto Rico Electric Power Authority. We continue in economic crisis after hurricanes of historic proportion, recent damaging earthquakes, and now the pandemic. Amongst these challenges and still impeding Puerto Rico's rebound stands the broken electrical system. I'm before you today as chairman of the Institute, the ICSE. I'm past president of the Puerto Rico Manufacturers Association and partner in a building services group of companies in the eastern U.S. Puerto Rico has an ongoing need for electrical system reorganization, investment plan, and contracting oversight that protects consumers and U.S. taxpayers' monies. It's a great concern that the latest PREPA fiscal plan by the Fiscal and Oversight Management Board, the Fiscal Board, ignores the fact that the restructuring support agreement, PREPA's RSA or debt reorganization structuring is unsustainable. There have been no attempts to update it in 2 years, and it has never been presented to the legislature and Energy Bureau. The fiscal plan does not include PREPA's most recent interim financial statement with capital deficit, nor has it met budget review and approval by the PREPA board, nor the regulator, the PREPA. Furthermore, PREPA's consumer representative, the only publicly elected member of the board and ICSE executive director, has challenged the government's ongoing suggestion of adequate PREPA board independence and professionalism. The PREPA board hastily approved the stalled and inaccurate RSA in 2019, despite a shallow fiduciary process that the consumer representative opposed with supporting evidence. More recently, PREPA's handling of Costa Sur's generation repairs following the January earthquakes has been suspect at best and raises questions about project execution skill and capacity to govern through operational crisis. There has been no accountability to the fact that Costa Sur's Unit 5 remains offline during peak season demand today. We know damage to this unit was minor and temporary fixes were available while longer-term solutions could be implemented. Yet PREPA put forward a questionable emergency summer generation plan to save the day, not executed today. PREPA needs independent professional and board governance with world-class supervision from the Utility Regulatory Framework of the Puerto Rico Energy Policy Act, known as Act 17. Yet major decisions are still dominated by the same political appointees of ex-Governor Ricardo Rosselló. The fiscal board is ill-equipped to address this lack of government commitment to best performance metric that should drive transformation in our government agencies. But the fiscal board can and must work closely with our utility regulator with adherence to Act 17 and PROMESA, with the consumer participation rights and obligations that Act 17 mandates. The fiscal board and the PREP have recently approved 2 utility scale investments with no tariff input proceedings, no Act 17 compliant adjudicatory processes, nor an approved infrastructure plan. One is a 10-year generation contract, the other a 15-year transmission and distribution management and operations agreement. 18 months after enactment of Act 17, the unapproved PREPA infrastructure plan still pushes fossil fuel infrastructure at the expense of large and small private renewable energy markets. Fragmented and non-transparent contract approval processes with no lawfully approved energy transformation roadmap yet will give way to lengthy regulatory or legal proceedings like the 2-year-old RSA. No government transparency portals and public relations spin can overcome this operational and legal dysfunction. I hope with your continued oversight and robust engagement of all to improve local utility regulatory capacity issues hindering real progress at PREPA and the sustainable electrical system reorganization, ICSI can be of service to the committee and the PREP so that PREPA, PROMESA, fiscal board effectively support Act 17 transformation framework to finally achieve energy justice for the more than 3.2 million American citizens living in Puerto Rico. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And let me, to begin the questioning, let me turn to the chairs of subcommittees to begin with, and by sequence, Mr. Lowenthal, if you have any comments or questions, let me recognize you. On the line.
Okay, I will come back and ask.
Okay. Mr. Gallegos?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to have just one more, a couple of questions. And first question is for Edison. I want to make sure I see him up there. In terms of, for many years, we've been talking about trying to make the grid both energy independent and be able to use more renewable energies, but also at the same time being able to be resilient. And what are the steps that we even have to take before we start moving in that direction, in your opinion, in order for us to have both a resilient grid as well as one that is largely solely run on renewables?
Thanks for the question. We are right now in the evaluation of PREPA IRP. PREPA IRP submitted to the Bureau presents a new grid, a resilient one, that takes into consideration the impact of hurricanes Maria and Irma. What they propose, and I can defer to Jose Ortiz to better explain what they submitted, is that the island will be divided in 8 different mini-grids. And the grid will be interconnected and will be provided by generation within the grid and also with the centralized generation. We are right now evaluating what PREPA submitted, and we will have a final say in August. Again, I think that in order to better explain what they already submitted to the Bureau, I defer to Jose Ortiz to answer your question.
And I unfortunately was not here, I think, when Ruth Santiago spoke at Queremos Sol Coalition. But I was hoping to get your opinion, Ruth, on the plan to basically solarize the Puerto Rican energy grid, as well as obviously to make it durable and resilient.
Okay, thank you for the question. So the government of Puerto Rico last year passed the Energy Public Policy Act, which has a renewable portfolio standard, as you know, that requires 40% renewables by 2025, 60% by 2040, and 100% by 2050. Unfortunately, what we've seen from the government has been totally in the other direction. So look at the new Fortress project in San Juan for conversion of those two big units to burn so-called natural methane gas. Look at the renegotiation of the Ecoelectrica contracts under disfavorable terms. And although there's talk of supposedly renegotiating some of the existing contracts, we have not seen any of that, and the conditions do not seem favorable to the people of Puerto Rico. And on the contrary, what we saw both in the IRP, the draft IRP, and during the hearings is that customer-sited generation is the least cost alternative of all generation, of all energy supply arrangements in Puerto Rico. And so even the economics, the technological viability is there. And that should be coupled with energy efficiency and conservation and demand response programs in order to take Puerto Rico really to the 21st century, using resources that are locally available. And as I mentioned, proven to be financially, both admittedly in the IRP, and technically viable.
Right. Thank you, Ruth. I just want to get one more question in. Thank you. And the question for Mr. Ortiz. I hear a lot about, solarizing renewable energies and durability. There is a plan for large battery storage for this type of energy you're going to try to contain, because it doesn't work unless you actually have large battery storage, working with microgrids in order for you to basically be able to smooth out the peaks and the valleys of electricity.
You're absolutely right, Congressman Gallego. Certainly, we are ready with E3 Authority for Fontanes issued a request for proposal.
Okay, and I ran out of time, but what you're telling me is that you are issuing requests for proposals for battery storage to complement the microgrid. Okay, I yield back. Thank you.
For your comments, questions.
Thank you. My first question will be to Mr. Ortiz.
For batteries.
I don't know if it now, Mr. Ortiz, you said in your, you were talking in your statement about a different amount of federal funds, and we were discussing that prior to this hearing. How much federal funds PREPA just received, not just from FEMA, but all the federal entities to this day? And if you can provide later on the committee a detailed breakdown on how much PREPA received or expect to receive in the next 2 years from different federal agencies, FEMA, HUD, the Army Corps of Engineers, and the Department of Energy for the rebuild and modernize Puerto Rico's energy infrastructure.
For the fixing of the system, we have over $2.5 billion already received and reimbursed in many cases for PREPA. We have we have completed basically the agreement on the estimates for the long run, the full modernization of the grid. That will be disclosed in the next few days probably. And about the next year and a half to 2 years, we have a program for $1.7 billion to be invested mostly on the critical loads, like the hospitals, water systems, shelters, and the, for example, medical center, the airport, and such critical facilities. So that's in a
Sorry, you're not including there the $1.9 billion from CDBGDR funds approved.
Not yet, not yet. We're giving shape to it.
And what is happening that these funds are not yet been disbursed to the island?
That will be the CDBGDR are basically at the end of the line. It will be after we exhaust basically the 428 funding. We hope to start doing something with the 428 to redo of the grid in the third quarter of this year. I hope we're very close to that moment.
How explicitly the federal funds are going to help the modernization process of PREPA, and how the new contract will be working with federal funds?
Well, the new contract basically pulls an entity who has been 35 years dealing with federal funds. They will be taking care of the compliance and the procurement. The way to spend the federal funds are in alignment with the IRP, the PREP. It's considering at this point. So certainly, as Edison Avilés just mentioned, that will show a decentralized energy system consisting in about 40% of renewables by year 2025, being supported by a cleaner fuel fossil-driven equipment like, for example, natural gas in San Juan and natural gas in the south, in Ecoeléctrica and Costa Sur. We will divide the island in 8 small islands or 8 mini grids, and those will basically be able to operate independently. And they will, assuming we have a hurricane strikes, you may lose 1 or 2 of those areas, but the rest of Puerto Rico will be able to continue working. A lot of undergrounding of power lines will be happening as well. Two of the biggest are the East Coast, what we call the grid, the Humacao system. That includes the municipalities of Humacao, Naguabo, Las Piedras, and Yabucoa. Normally, that's the door to all the events we have had in the past 100 years, basically. And also a very strong support and undergrounding of the important power lines to the industrial sector along PR 30 and along the Northeast. There you have the Medtronics, the Amgens, and all these big companies. And if we're looking at bringing those type of companies to Puerto Rico, we certainly have to provide a very reliable power.
One last question at this time. We are now in the hurricane season, so it's an obligated question to make if Puerto Rico's electric infrastructure is ready to face and withstand another hurricane or a storm in the next months. Are you ready?
Yes, yes. The answer is yes. We are in a very different condition. We have 5 times the inventory. We had, before Maria, we have $22 million in inventory. Today, we are $140 million in inventory. The strengthening of the transmission lines from south to north certainly are redone in 145 miles per hour winds. And certainly the project we have in San Juan 5 and 6 in San Juan provides a lot of reliability to the metropolitan area. One of the biggest issues was that 70% of the Puerto Rico demand is in the north, and we lost all the transmission from south to north. So having all that generation with natural gas, we will provide additional generation.
Let me now turn, time's up. Time's up. Let me now turn to Mr. Stankos. You were here earlier, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Ranking Member Bishop, and all of our witnesses for their expertise today. Like many, I'm hopeful that a compendium of tragedies that have befallen Puerto Rico, a recession to hurricanes to earthquakes and a pandemic, have a silver lining in that the island can emerge with a clean and resilient electric grid. We know now that we need clean power for urgent climate reasons. However, particularly in the case of Puerto Rico, clean power is also overwhelmingly the cheapest solution. The average cost of power on the island is currently an extremely burdensome 17 cents per kilowatt hour. That is twice the average cost of power generated from rooftop solar energy in Puerto Rico and nearly 9 times the average cost of wind power. I commend the goals of Law 17 that drive the island to renewable power. I'm now particularly interested in seeing how they will be practically implemented. Of course, the trick in implementing these renewable sources is always front-end cost. They tend to be somewhat expensive to build and then pay back over the long term. That is where the silver lining comes in. There is always already a need to spend substantial sums of money on new electricity construction. I think it is clear that in order for PREPA to live up to its mission of delivering reliable, low-cost electricity to Puerto Ricans, that money must go toward constructing renewables. So, Mr. Ortiz, Puerto Rico is expecting around $1.9 billion of community development block grant disaster relief funds for the electric grid reconstruction. Those funds represent a great opportunity to help low and moderate income families finance community-based energy projects such as rooftop solar. These funds are also an opportunity to promote community energy resiliency projects. Does PREPA currently have a plan for how those funds will be used, and is PREPA committed to use these funds for those much-needed purposes?
Absolutely, and I certainly agree with you. You know, the $1.9 billion will certainly supply what is needed for the poor and mid-income families need to have their own detached solar system. I certainly vouch for that. The solar system cannot be only for wealthy families in Puerto Rico. We have to be very careful. You know, when we talk about sun for everybody, it's not really that way. I think the $1.9 billion, I really would focus on the use of those for the 1,800 megawatts of solar power that will be needed by 2025. Certainly the best use we can make for those CDBGDR funding.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I'd like to turn to a different issue now regarding some of the challenges of ensuring that a public-private partnership serves the people in the way it's intended. I'm particularly worried about the implications of future natural disasters, which are projected to become both more common and more severe, particularly in the Caribbean as the climate warms. Mr. Fontanes, can LUMA terminate the agreement in an extended force major event? And if so, wouldn't an extended force major event such as after a hurricane be a time when grid work would be most needed?
Thank you for your question. I think what you may be referring to is the standard force majeure clause in the contract. I think as in a typical contract, there are force majeure provisions to account for delays in services or operation, but that is definitely not intended to address the response for a hurricane. It's actually, this is what the LUMA team excels at. These are the companies that are called in to work in disasters, not only in the United States, but all over the globe. They attended disasters in California after the fires. They have attended hurricanes in Texas and in Florida. They have attended the wildfires in Australia. This is really one of their major strengths. I think one of the things that they are doing now during the transition period is working together with PREPA so that even though they have not commenced operations officially and are still in transition, they can assist PREPA in the event that we get struck by a hurricane during this season. I think that is definitely a misconstruction of a typical contract clause that is included in the P3 contract, but it's definitely not meant to be used as an excuse not to respond to the hurricane. That is actually what they're here to do as part of being the T&D operators. They're emergency responders, and they're going to be out there. They're already working on plans to help PREPA, and that is what they do. That is one of the criteria that we selected them upon, and I think if you look at the Partnership Committee report that's available on our website, you can see what they propose, their plans, and what they intend to do once they're here.
Thank you. I had a question, Mr. Chair, on decarbonization of Ms. Santiago, but I've run out of time, but I'll get that to the committee.
So
I yield back.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
My turn is up on the sequence. Ms. Howland, I don't know, I think we're in the same group. Somebody would available for the chair. If not, then I'm going to call a recess and we'll return on the completion of at least the first vote or the second vote. So with that, we'll recess until the votes are done, and I apologize to the witnesses. Thank you. God damn.
For questions for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, for holding this important hearing. My first question will be addressed to Mr. Ortiz. Mr. Ortiz, I have introduced legislation entitled the Puerto Rico Recovery Accuracy in Disclosures Act, which requires all consultants and advisors to PROMESA to publicly disclose their relationships and conflicts in order to increase transparency. In fact, I have documents in my power that demonstrate that consultants to the board are also consultants to SoftBank, which also has an interest in New Fortress Energy. Moreover, SoftBank also happens to be a client of the consulting group McKinsey. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, I would like to submit this document to the record. Mr. Ortiz, do you believe